If you can show that there's a world out there where there's competitive dog sweater knitters, and it's cutthroat world, and they're competing, and you're at the top of it. I mean, I'm not guaranteeing you're going to get it, but you're more able to get it than with an NIW. I would say your chances are almost impossible.
If you do not have license in the United States, then you cannot prove that you will continue doing the same and will benefit the United States.
I've known this guy for 20 years. He's a great worker. He's a great engineer, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not going to work. Right? You've got to show that they've made some kind of specific contribution that has affected other people working in the field. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Raether, managing partner at AmLaw Group. And today in this episode of our podcast, we're going to talk about an increasingly popular visa category, EB-1A, which is a talent-based visa category that provides a green card. And it's become very popular lately just because the backlog with a lot of other categories, and also because, unlike, say, an EB-5, it doesn't require an investment of $800,000, which is not always within the means of everyone. So today we're going to go through a little bit about what the EB-1A really entails. There's a lot of information on ChatGPT and Google and whatnot, and I have to tell you, you got to be really careful, especially with ChatGPT, because it can give you kind of the good general information, but when you want to talk about the actual nitty-gritty and the actual practice, there's a lot of mistakes. And so hopefully we're going to put aside any of these mistakes or misconceptions that might exist out there and get you on the right path to understand whether you really qualify maybe for an EB-1A. So today I've got my colleague Yulia Novik here to help me do all that. Yulia, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Charles. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Excellent. So let's get right down to it. Let's talk about what the EB-1A is. And then Yulia, you and I can kind of go through some of the misconceptions and the myths and how you put together a good case. So one of my colleagues once said, comparing an EB-1A compared to, say, other talent visas like NIW, which is a national interest waiver, that visa category is focused on the activity of the person. The government's really looking at the activity. What are they doing, and is that important for the U.S. in general? Whereas the EB-1A, they focus more on the person. Of course, it's important kind of what you're doing, but there's a lot more variety of options, of careers, of activities that would qualify for an EB-1A than an NIW. Because, say, for example, I don't know, Yulia, if you've got an example too. Let's say for an NIW, you're, I don't know, what could we say? A civil engineer or something like that. Let's say you're a civil engineer and you build bridges. And we know in the United States, there's some infrastructure problems. Bridges are kind of falling apart. They need maintenance. There's a shortage of bridge experts. You could prove that, hey, you'd qualify. For an EB-1A, we don't have to show that there's a dying need for somebody, in your field. We just have to show that you're in this field, and it could be a really narrow field, and you're at the top of that field, like say the top 10% of that field. So, I mean, I don't know, you've heard about these stories too. We even heard, I think somebody got an EB-1A because they knitted sweaters for dogs or something. Do you remember that? Was that a story? Maybe that was just an urban myth. I don't know.
Why not?
Well, I guess,
why not? If there is a competition and you participate in it and your sweater is the best, why not?
So I hate to say it, but you can play with a little bit more with the EB-1A. If you can show that there's a world out there where there's competitive dog sweater knitters, and it's cutthroat world, and they're competing, and you're at the top of it. I mean, I'm not guaranteeing you're going to get it, but you're more able to get it than with an NIW. I would say your chances are almost impossible.
You really need to find a place where dogs need sweaters.
That's right. Yeah. So we might be limited to northern climates, maybe Canada. There might be some good clients for that. Anyway, so that's to start with, right? You're focusing on the person for an EB-1A, not on the activity. And so what you need to prove is that person has extraordinary abilities in the arts, science, business, sports, stuff of that nature. Now, Yulia, what are your thoughts? Are there any activities that are more qualified or less qualified for an EB-1A? Or should I put it a different way? Are there any career activities, or if a client comes to us who's a specialist in XYZ, are there some where it's just really tough to make an EB-1A.
Yes,
case.
and I would say that those who are professionals who must be licensed are less likely to qualify than those who need sweaters for dogs.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I don't think you have to have a license to do dog sweaters.
No, I don't think so.
Good.
But those professions that require to have license to practice it, if you do not have license in the United States, then you cannot prove that you will continue doing the same and will benefit the United States.
So top of the list there is probably doctors and lawyers, right? Because if you're a lawyer, a doctor, you want to practice in the U.S., you have to have a local license. And no matter how good of a lawyer you are in your home country or a doctor, and we've had that. We've had we had a cardiologist, we had some other medical specialists. They were at the top of their industry in their country, but they don't have a license in the U.S. So in those cases, whether it's a lawyer, attorney, maybe an architect, you have to find some field, some activity in the U.S. that you could work in that's related to your expertise and your education, but it doesn't quite require a license.
Yeah, you have to find a way around, but it's not only find what you can do in the United States, because if we tell in that you will be a mediator, for example, in the United States, if it doesn't require a license, then showing your extraordinary abilities as an attorney in your country will not work. We have to show that you were an extraordinary mediator.
Right. Yep. So that brings us maybe to the next topic, that we have to show a connection between what you're going to do in the U.S. and what you did in your home country. And in particular, that experience that you have has to be prolonged and sustained. Those are key words that they use a lot of times. So we've seen cases sometimes where clients decided, hey, I want to get an EB-1A. I might not have all the evidence. And they go to these middlemen, these consultancies that are out there, and they do a lot of work to create all this hype about them and all this evidence. But you can see this was all like in the last 3 to 6 months. So you might have been the greatest lawyer for the last 3 to 6 months in your home country, but what about before that? There's nothing. There's no evidence. And that's really problematic too. So that gets back to the point that Yulia was making, that we have to show that they had that experience and that it was sustained for a period of time. What is sustained? I guess there's no exact answer. I don't know, 2 years probably, I would say at least.
At least 2 years.
Ideally longer. So I would say at least 2 years that you can show that you had this evidence. Now here's another interesting thing. Let's say, and we've had cases like this, let's say the guy was, I think it was an athlete or something. They were top of their field, maybe, Olympic or, world level, awards and stuff like that. But then, 7 years ago, they stopped doing it. They're getting old, or they stopped, and boom. And now they're coming to us for an EB-1A. So again, top of the world almost in their field, but they just kind of dropped out of everything 7 years ago. Would this work?
If they're not competing anymore, no. And I think this is the best example of proving that you have a talent in the same field that you will be practicing in. So with athletes, it's if you were competing and now you're coaching, but all your recognition is for competitions as an athlete, we cannot show that you will come to coach in the United States. We have to prove your success in coaching in this situation.
So that's two items, key points there. We need to show that your experience was sustained, meaning over a period of at least 2 years. It has to be recent, meaning, if you were a great athlete 10 years ago and you haven't been competing the last 10 years, that's also a problem. And then as Yulia mentioned, that your experience has to be related to what you're going to do here. So, and your awards, right? So if you had all these awards as an athlete, but then you decided to be a coach and you're coaching the last 5 years, but you have no awards as a coach, no awards, no recognition, nothing. And you want to come to the US and you're saying, I'm going to coach here. That's going to be a problem too. So all important factors to keep in mind. So here's something too. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. People think certain things are important, and they're really not. So there's misconceptions about what really is important for an EB-1A. So like, I'll give you an example, Yulia, like somebody comes to us and they say, hey, I've got a master's degree or a PhD and I have 10 years of experience. That should be enough, right?
Not really for the talent visa.
Right.
I mean, we can use it if you have additional objective evidence that you reach the top of your field.
Right. But there's obviously there's more to it. Here's another thing that often comes up. People say, hey, I'm a C-level executive at a top 3 company in my country. Let's say I'm like the deputy director at the largest oil company in my country. That's probably good enough.
Again, not completely. We can, from that right away, find maybe proof, evidence for one criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Is your company gives you letters that you had leading
critical leading role.
critical
Yeah,
role.
right.
Yes, it's a start, but there is a long way to go because we have what I love about EB-1A. We have objective criteria.
Mm-hmm.
There are 10 of them,
Right.
and we have to prove that you satisfied at least 3. And those, if you only satisfy 3, preferably that they're strong.
Right. Exactly. And even something too, a lot of times clients will say, oh, I've got a lot of articles printed about me and even TV interviews and stuff like that. And the one thing with that, as you know, is most cases, those articles, when they're written, they're not written in the way that's necessary for an EB-1A, right? They just might talk about the person, hey, they have new dog sweaters that they just sewed, or they won this contest or something like that. But they don't talk about specifically the skills, the achievements of
and sometimes people can be successful in several fields. So if the article is talking about one field, but we see that you continue in another, so that article would not work.
Right. So that's all the negative stuff. Let's talk about the positive stuff. Like, what does a strong EB-1 case actually consist of? What does it have to have? Now, one thing that we've talked about in the past, Yulia, maybe you can share. You feel, and I agree with you, that there's so like you said, there's roughly 10 criteria. They have to satisfy 3 of them. But in our experience, they're not all equal. There's really good criteria and there's kind of weaker criteria. So which criteria would you characterize as being more important?
Awards in the competitions of national or international level.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just participation. It's an actual award. First or second place, third we will use, but it's not so convincing. Also, scientific articles.
Mm-hmm.
And your participation as a judge in competition.
Yeah.
Those are 3 most important, I think, criteria. And again, they will not work for everybody. So artists would unlikely write a scientific article.
Right. Or a business executive would unlikely to be a judge in a competition. It's possible. But
or even win in a competition, not just judge. There are not too many competitions for business people.
Yeah.
If there is no specific niche like you.
Well, they do have some kind of like entrepreneur of the year, some kind of, in some countries. It could work out. But I agree, being a judge and a jury for a business person, maybe in the tech field might work. But yes, I would agree with what you said. I think if you have something related to being a judge or a jury, having awards, scientific articles, and also I think probably a contribution to the field, that if you can get strong recommendation letters about your contribution to the field, not just saying, I've known this guy for 20 years, he's a great worker, he's a great engineer, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not going to work. You're right. You've got to show that they've made some kind of specific contribution that has affected other people working in the field, that somehow they started copying him, or that person came up with some innovative product or idea that has affected, other, like say if it's a singer, they came up with a new, style of singing or songs, and that affected other people.
And also contribution to the field, expert letters, we have to have them because someone has to say that, yes, whatever you wrote was used by others and it has significance in the field. But we are quite often asked to provide additional objective evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And that objective evidence may be something that will not work for any other criteria, like you wrote a book. Mm-hmm. It's not scientific article, so we cannot use it in any category. But that book is discussed by the expert in his letter,
mm-hmm.
so now we're using it.
Right.
Or the same what is popular among former Soviet countries, like presidential recognition,
political awards, kind of
Medal of Honor, which is definitely not an award for competition, but for this criteria of
for any criteria, contribution to the field or something.
Contribution.
So that's a very good point. Yeah, that whether it's if it's a letter indicating the contribution to the field, or maybe other distinctions or recognition, these political letters like from politicians, bureaucrats, ministries, is nice as they feel to get those awards. They don't play a role, unfortunately, this context. So what you need to do is get letters from other experienced, recognized specialists who themselves have good accomplishments in this field, and comment on your achievements and whatnot. So next, I thought we could talk about how we go about evaluating clients. And the good news here is, and what I want to emphasize for our viewers is, don't be distressed or worried if you don't meet all the criteria at your first meeting with an attorney, because the vast majority of our cases, very, very few people satisfy all the criteria, when they first come in the door to meet with us. So I would say there's probably three categories of people. There's the people that meet all of the criteria, and it's a pretty straightforward process. There's a category of those that have a pretty good background. Maybe they have one or two criteria covered, but we have to do some work to get the rest. And then there's the third category where they might not have any category, or maybe they have one, but it's a pretty weak one, and we really have no idea where they're going to get the remaining criteria covered. So let's kind of go through those three categories. The first one, obviously, is the easiest. If they more or less meet the standards and the criteria, it's great. I would say that's less than 10% of the clients that come to us, so you shouldn't be too worried if you don't meet that. And maybe we could go to the other extreme, where those that have no criteria or very little, maybe one, how difficult is it to work with those people? And I guess that's just a case-by-case basis, right? We evaluate not only what they have, but we evaluate the likelihood that they could get that additional evidence.
Yeah, and it probably goes to the point about sustained acclaim.
Mm-hmm.
What is important here to see if people chose the niche, if they know what they're doing. It's not like, I do this, and then on side I do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I competed in, I don't know, swimming something,
Mm-hmm.
but then I'm doing other sports. No, we cannot really combine them. We have to choose one.
Right.
So if you
and it has to be sustained, like you said,
Yes.
over a period of time.
If you know what you're doing and you started a while ago, and maybe there is something like even your old organization can give you a letter that, yeah, maybe you were not manager or CEO,
Mm-hmm.
but you created something for the organization that helped its development,
Mm-hmm.
it's a start.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think how we deal with that category of clients, that if they have few criteria covered, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. We have to work with them. We will give our assessment as to how realistic we think it is that we can get that additional evidence. And it also probably is going to require extra work from the client. And I'll be honest, not every client wants to spend that time and money and resources to get that additional evidence. I mean, so it really depends on you, the client, as well, whether you want to put in that effort to getting articles published. That's pretty straightforward. That's not too difficult. But if we think, hey, you need to participate as a judge in a jury or stuff like that, and you need to find out where these competitions are and participate in them, that's going to require time and money. And so that's something each client has to decide.
It does require time, but if you, again, know your field, and for example, where you're just refusing to participate in something because you're not public person, you don't want to go somewhere, you don't want to be a speaker at the conferences, but you were invited, then you know that you can get invited again.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's even easier to deal with them. Like if we have the beginning and people say, yeah, I was invited for the interviews and everything, I was offered to participate, but I didn't want to. We just need time, but we can develop, because some people are coming with, I have everything.
Yeah.
And there is just a mess.
Mm-hmm. And we're willing to work, we're happy to work with clients. And that's maybe where the added value is of our work, is we're willing to work with clients, develop the strategy and help them see it through, to the end. And then there's finally the third category, which is kind of in the middle there. They don't have a whole lot and they don't have a whole little. They're kind of in the middle. And that's probably the most common situation for people that come to us. And that's probably easiest to deal with, because we, they might have one or two categories, which isn't enough, but we feel quite confident they could get another, maybe two, maybe three more categories with a little bit of work. And so, again, that's probably the most common situation. And I think it's a doable case.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention what seems, at least to me, is a pretty difficult case when the petition was filed before, sometime before, by another attorney or some paralegal, which is quite often here. People offer their services because they think they're qualified. You don't kind of starting you. You don't start developing uniqueness because you have to go back and see what was there submitted
Right.
and how was it presented. And it can mess up a little bit what you would do otherwise.
Right, right. I mean, that's a good question. And people ask sometimes, do they look back at my previous case to evaluate, to compare it if I file a second one? And I don't know if we know 100% for sure, but I suspect they do.
They may. At least
Yeah.
they may. It's all there. It's all available. And you sure do not want to contradict whatever
Exactly,
was
right. That's
said
the most
before.
important thing, right? So the other thing, so getting back to that thing where the majority of our clients do not have all the criteria they need, and that might require maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months to get the other ones to participate in some competitions, get some articles published and stuff like that. So that's all resolvable. But I suppose maybe to help our viewers, maybe we can go through a couple examples of, these are kind of like common examples of successful people, but they just might not qualify for the EB-1A, and we can talk about why. So let's say we have a founder of a startup. Let's say it's a tech startup. He founded the business, or she. Hundreds of employees, super, well-known in its sector. They've got Western, clients, Western partners. They're in Asia. They got a great footprint and stuff like that. Isn't that enough by itself to qualify for an EB-1A?
No, because as I mentioned before, what I like is there is an objective criteria.
Mm-hmm. And so he's missing what? Recognition, I suppose, theoretically.
He's
right?
missing recognition, and recognition meaning there is no such even criteria as recognition.
Right, but he
We
doesn't have maybe recommendation letters about his contribution to the
Yeah.
field, or press coverage about him.
Press, his articles, or participation in a competition,
Mhm.
or him judging. Like if there is nothing, okay, if all the criteria that we can collect are some letters from others,
Mhm.
from our colleagues, employers, or even experts, but no objective evidence, it's still going to be a problem.
Yeah. So I think this guy would be an example of a good client that maybe has little evidence at the time, but because of his success and experience, probably likely we could put together a good case.
Yeah,
Would you
and
agree?
again, startup founder, we don't know who actually developed the business. If he was just an investor,
Mhm.
we need to prove that not just the business is successful, he is successful.
He was the locomotive driving everything, right? How about another case that comes up a lot? A content creator, somebody that's got a great following online, social media, 500,000 subscribers, maybe even more, a bunch of YouTube buttons, silver, platinum, the whole thing there. Is that enough to get an EB-1A?
You mentioned YouTube buttons. This is actually a good thing. Like it's already a word in a competition can qualify.
Mhm.
So if we have that, we have a good start. But usually content creators, bloggers, YouTubers, they do not have it.
Mhm.
So if we don't have it, it's harder.
Don't have it, meaning the YouTube buttons.
We don't have YouTube buttons.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And this is very popular topic because right now social media, I think it's everything.
Right, right,
And
right.
people are sure that when they have a lot of followers, there are articles published about them on, I don't know, Instagram, somewhere else.
But that's not
It's
even
valid.
an article. That's the thing too. People
No.
say too, I've got a lot of posts written about me on Instagram and stuff like that. But you need to understand that those are not articles, right? That's not an article per se. So that doesn't count as a publication. But that also brought up an interesting point about the popularity with content creators. But here's another thing too that comes up with these types of people. What are they going to do in the U.S., right? And that gets to the thing is the USCIS is now focusing more attention on what the people are going to do here in the U.S. In the past, we know we could just get a declaration, a letter written from the applicant. I'm going to go do this, and that was enough. Now they're looking at this to say, hey, what are you really going to do? Give us the details.
Benefit, which we still do not know how to answer benefit to the United States. They added it, I think, last year, and there is still no explanation what it is. So we have to brainstorm in each case.
Right, right. And that's why just a content creator by that person in and of itself, sure, he or she might have a lot of followers and subscribers, and that's great for him or her individually, but what's the value maybe to the U.S. or what's that talent? And so there we have to brainstorm a little, and we've done that in the past with people that to explain, okay, what they're going to be involved in the U.S. And ideally, you might get already some letters of intent from U.S. companies or partners that might say, hey, we want to work with you. You're an influencer. We want to work with you on the following, areas.
Yeah.
So hopefully this was helpful to kind of understand, get a better understanding of what's really needed for an EB-1A. And I hope this helps our viewers come away with a better understanding, gets rid of maybe some of the stereotypes that are out there, and hopefully emphasizes the fact that there are a lot of nuances, and that maybe is why it's important to work with an experienced team of attorneys who've actually done this for more than just a couple of years and kind of know all these nuances and how things are changing and how USCIS is adjudicating these things differently than they have in the past.
Yeah, because we're learning every day, Charles, ourselves. Basically, it's not an approval, which we prefer and we most often get, but it's not an approval that teaches us, but a request for evidence.
Oh, it's well,
yeah.
Fortunately, it's a request for evidence or the denials. Fortunately, we haven't had many denials. One or two. So I guess there's less materials for us to learn from. So if you get a denial, they'll tell you why they're denying. But for better or worse, I guess it's for the best that we haven't had many of those. But yeah, so it's a learning process for everybody.
But requests are great. And we had very, very serious requests where we even were thinking, should we answer or should we refile? Which I always say answer, because we're going to learn if it works or not.
Yeah. And in those cases where we had doubts, we filed and we got approved. So
we did,
it worked out. So thanks for your time, Yulia. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Charles, for having me.
And hopefully we'll see everybody next time. Thank you.